The bark came at 3:47 in the morning, and it wasn't like any sound the dog had made before. Sharp, insistent, wrong. Sarah bolted upright in bed, heart already racing before her mind caught up to what her body already knew. Something was happening. Max stood at the bedroom door, rigid, staring down the hallway with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He barked again. Same tone, same urgency. This wasn't the bark he used for squirrels or delivery trucks. This was different. She threw off the covers and followed him. He moved fast, claws clicking against hardwood, leading her straight to her daughter's room. The door was ajar. Max pushed through it with his nose and went directly to the bed where Emma slept, or should have been sleeping. But Emma wasn't moving right. Her breathing was shallow, erratic. Her skin felt cold when Sarah touched her shoulder. Panic hit like ice water. She grabbed her phone, dialed 911, and started talking before the operator finished her greeting. Max stayed at the bedside, eyes fixed on Emma, as if his attention alone could hold her in place until help arrived. The paramedic said later that the timing mattered. Minutes, not hours. Emma's blood sugar had dropped to dangerous levels, a complication no one had seen coming. She was diabetic, yes, but this was new. This was the kind of episode that doesn't announce itself until it's already critical. If Sarah had found her an hour later, maybe even 30 minutes later, the outcome would have been different. But she didn't find her late. Max did, and he made sure Sarah knew. That bark changed everything, not just that night, but what came after. Because once you've seen an animal do something that defies every assumption you've held about what they're capable of, you can't go back to seeing them the same way. Max wasn't trained for this. He wasn't a service dog. He was a mutt they'd adopted 2 years earlier from a shelter, a dog with no special skills listed on his intake form, no history suggesting he'd ever be anything other than a loyal companion who occasionally chewed furniture. And yet, he knew. Somehow he knew. The question that haunted Sarah afterward wasn't just how he detected the change in Emma's condition. It was why he cared enough to act. Dogs don't operate on obligation. They don't follow protocols. Whatever drove Max to wake her up that night came from somewhere deeper, something instinctive and inexplicable. Recognition, maybe, or responsibility. The kind that doesn't need language or logic to exist. In the days that followed, Sarah started paying attention to things she'd missed before. The way Max positioned himself near Emma during the day, close but not intrusive. How he watched her more carefully than he watched anyone else in the house. He'd always been affectionate with Emma, but this was something else. This was vigilance. She tested it once, casually, by asking Emma to sit on the couch while Sarah moved to the kitchen. Max followed Emma. When Sarah called him, he glanced back but didn't leave Emma's side. He'd made a choice. The doctors explained that some dogs can detect chemical changes in the body. Blood sugar shifts, seizures, even certain cancers produce scent markers imperceptible to humans but obvious to a dog's nose. It's not magic. It's biology. But knowing the mechanism didn't make it feel less extraordinary. Because Max hadn't been taught to recognize those markers. No one had rewarded him for alerting to them. He just did it, and he kept doing it. Sarah started documenting the pattern. Every time Emma's levels dropped even slightly, Max reacted. Sometimes it was subtle, a shift in posture, a quiet whine. Other times it was unmistakable, that same sharp bark that had started everything. He was never wrong, not once. The endocrinologist was skeptical at first, then fascinated, then insistent that they formalize what Max was already doing naturally. There were programs for this, certifications, ways to turn intuition into reliability. But here's what no one told Sarah. Training a dog to perform a task and trusting a dog who's already performing it without training are two entirely different things. One is about control, the other is about faith. And as Max continued to prove himself night after night, Sarah realized she was facing a question she'd never expected to confront. What do you do when an animal shows you they're capable of saving a life? Do you change how you see them? Do you change how you see yourself? The answer was still forming, but it started with a bark, and it wasn't finished yet. Sarah started sleeping lighter. Not intentionally, but her body adjusted anyway, attuned now to the possibility of Max's warning bark cutting through the silence. Emma noticed the change first. "You look tired, Mom," she said one morning, and Sarah realized she'd been holding her breath for weeks, waiting for the next crisis that Max would catch before it arrived. Trust is a strange thing to build with an animal. You can love a dog completely and still not trust them with your child's life. But Max had crossed that line without asking permission. And now Sarah existed in a space she hadn't known was possible. Reliance on something that couldn't explain itself. The training program wanted to evaluate him. Standard procedure, they said. Controlled environments, measured responses, documentation that would make his ability official. Sarah hesitated. What if formalizing it broke whatever instinct was driving him? What if turning intuition into expectation changed the equation? She scheduled the assessment anyway. They needed to know if this was sustainable or just a series of coincidences they'd been lucky enough to survive. The evaluation lasted 3 days. Max passed every test, but that wasn't what surprised the trainers. What surprised them was how he passed. Most alert dogs respond to scent markers with trained behaviors, specific signals they've been conditioned to perform. Max did something different. He adapted. If Emma was sitting, he nudged her hand. If she was standing, he positioned himself in her path. If she was asleep, he escalated, starting quiet and building intensity until someone responded. He wasn't following a script. He was problem solving. This isn't typical, the lead trainer told Sarah. Most dogs learn one alert method and stick with it. He's reading context. Sarah watched Max through the observation window, sitting calmly beside Emma during a simulated low-sugar episode, his eyes moving between her face and the door where help would come from. He looked patient, purposeful. Can you train that? Sarah asked. The trainer shook her head. We can refine it, but what he's doing? That's not something we taught him. That's just who he is. Who he is. As if dogs have identity beyond breed and temperament. As if they carry responsibility the way people do. But watching Max work, Sarah couldn't deny it anymore. He'd assigned himself a role, and he took it seriously. The certification made things easier in practical ways. Schools accepted him. Insurance covered costs. Strangers stopped questioning why a dog shadowed a 10-year-old girl everywhere she went. But the paperwork didn't change what mattered. Max had been doing this long before anyone validated it. Emma's confidence shifted too. She started testing boundaries she'd avoided before, sleeping over at friends' houses, joining after-school activities. Max went with her, a quiet presence that made risk feel manageable. Sarah watched her daughter grow bolder and realized the gift wasn't just safety, it was freedom. One night, months after that first bark, Sarah found herself sitting on the floor beside Max while Emma slept upstairs. She ran her hand along his spine, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. I don't know how you knew, she whispered. But thank you. Max's tail thumped once against the hardwood. He didn't look at her. His attention stayed fixed on the hallway, the path to Emma's room, the space he'd been guarding without being asked. Sarah used to think about what she'd do in an emergency, how she'd react, whether she'd be fast enough, strong enough, aware enough. She'd carried that weight silently, the way parents do, preparing for disasters they hope never come. Max had taken that weight, not all of it, but enough. And in doing so, he'd revealed something Sarah hadn't expected. Courage doesn't always look like action. Sometimes it looks like vigilance, like showing up night after night, ready for something that might not happen. She stood, stretched, headed toward the stairs. Max followed, 3 steps behind, the way he always did. At Emma's door, he paused, glanced inside, then settled in his usual spot just outside her room. Sarah didn't say goodnight. She just watched him for a moment. This dog who'd rewritten what she thought animals could understand, could care about, could choose to protect. Then she went to bed, and for the first time in months, she slept through the night. Because Max was listening, and that was enough. The bark that started everything didn't stop being significant just because it became routine. That's what most people miss when they hear stories like this. They focus on the dramatic moment, the crisis averted, the life saved. But the real story lives in what happens after. In the quiet nights when nothing goes wrong, but Max stays alert anyway. In the mornings when Emma wakes up safe because someone was watching who didn't need to be asked. We spend a lot of time talking about what animals can't do. Can't speak, can't reason, can't understand consequence the way humans do. But maybe we're measuring the wrong things. Because Max understood something fundamental that no amount of training could have installed. He understood that Emma mattered. And he decided somewhere in whatever passes for decision-making in a dog's mind that keeping her safe was his job. That's not obedience. That's not conditioning. That's choice. And choice, especially when it costs something, when it requires vigilance and sacrifice and showing up every single day without praise or reward, that's the kind of thing we usually reserve for describing human character. Sarah learned to stop asking how Max knew and started accepting that he did, because the mechanism mattered less than the outcome. And the outcome was a child who got to grow up, who got to be careless in the way children should be, because someone else had decided to carry the weight of attention. Some bonds don't need explanation, they just need recognition. Max gave Sarah and Emma something irreplaceable, not by being extraordinary, but by being present. Consistently, reliably, without ever expecting anything in return except maybe the chance to keep doing it tomorrow. The bark changed Max's life by revealing what had always been there. Not potential that needed unlocking, but purpose that was simply waiting for the right moment to matter. And once it did, everything else followed. Not dramatically, not perfectly, but steadily. One quiet night at a time.